right? Chinese open weight models climbed from 2% to 61% of open router traffic in the last 2 years. Alibaba's Qwen model alone has over 700 million downloads. I'm sure the numbers surpassed since I looked.
It's up to 1 billion now, so.
Yeah, there we go. With 180,000 derivative models. And one of the things, again, we talk about is, when you have an open weight model, it's very easy to fork it and develop it and retrain it yourself. You say that the U.S. export controls on Anthropic's Fable 5 backfired spectacularly, specifically that within 24 hours, China's Z.AI released GLM 5.2 under MIT license. In fact, that was the model used to deal with the Hugging Face debacle. Brazil's Rio built on Qwen. Japanese Sakana released Fugu Ultra. You say that the U.S. denial strategy didn't slow China at all. It accelerated the innovation and alternative ecosystem.
大家好，这里是华人看世界 CNView 频道。距离通用人工智能，也就是 AGI， 究竟还有5年、10年还是20年？这个看似关于技术的时间判断，正在悄然改变中美两国的政策、资本和安全决策。本期节目，我们将跟随一场重量级对话，走进中美 AI 竞赛最敏感的核心地带。中国为什么大力推动开源模型？美国的芯片出口管制究竟有没有放慢中国的发展？当数据中心建设遭遇私人信贷泡沫 ，AI 行业会不会重演互联网泡沫甚至更严重的危机？与此同时，机器人产业、能源布局、世界人工智能合作组织以及台湾和 TSMC 的地缘政治风险也将被一一摆上台面。更值得关注的是，双方真的在争夺同一条终点线吗？还是说，这场竞赛本可以从零和对抗转向共同合作？当超级智能、国家安全与全球经济彼此纠缠，任何一个判断失误都可能影响整个世界的未来。接下来就让我们一起看看这场关乎技术、财富与文明走向的深度交锋究竟揭示了什么。
And your bio lists roles like vice chairman of AVRA, the VR Industry Alliance endorsed by the Chinese Ministry of Industry and Information Tech, and a 3-year professorships at Beihang, which is a defense-linked university on the U.S. entities list. I want our audience to understand the full picture. So if you wouldn't mind, so folks can understand, where you're coming from, if you'd walk us through those relationships, past and present, with any Chinese government bodies or government-linked institutions. What was your involvement? Anything going on now? Were you compensated? Want to understand your connection to the Chinese government so people understand you are a U.S. citizen. People should know that. But I guess from perspective point of view, since we're going to be talking about a lot of, very sensitive topics, give us your background there, if you would.
Sure, absolutely. And you're right. I'm a U.S. citizen for over 45 years. So I moved here when I was very young. I was born in China. But having worked and lived in China, you have to deal with the government on a daily basis because that's an important part of being functional there. The IVRA, Industry of VR Alliance, was a industry association that was endorsed by the government. And if you want it to be a functional organization, it has to be endorsed, right? So, and there was 300 plus members, and about a third of them were international companies like NVIDIA and Samsung and Qualcomm and AMD and Google and so forth. So these are the kind of companies that, they're trying to get into to accelerate the industry. When I was working there for HTC, who at the time was the head of the leading virtual reality, augmented reality company in the world, and and I was kind of the head of the organization, the head of the company in China, right? So, and by the way, and HTC is a Taiwanese company. So at the time, I was working for a Taiwanese company, but we were given a lot of influence because we were such a important party and important player in the industry. The Beihang University is a very large university. It's a university of aeronautics and aerospace. But it also was a leading university for virtual reality, augmented reality. And they've been teaching that for over 30 years. And in my role as head of HTC, which was a virtual reality company, they wanted me to teach there on a part-time basis. And neither of these positions were compensated. After I've left China in 2024, I've not had any involvement with either of them as well. So just to hopefully clarify where things are. But I think the thing to remember is that for you to understand and work with any industry, with any government, you have to understand both sides. And I think this is why having actually close discussions with them, having worked with them at the city level, province level, and some national level leadership there, you understand their mindset. And I think that's very important to actually have proper dialogue.
Alex, do you have any other question you wanted to ask?
Yeah, we'll get into it as we get into it, but this should certainly be an interesting discussion.
Yeah,
but
sure.
we got Alvin's professional bio, but his growing up bio is really interesting too. Why don't you tell us just like about your childhood and growing up, and then how you got to the States? And it's a super cool story.
It's a little bit strange, but I was born during the Cultural Revolution. So both my parents were artists, and my mother sent a letter to Mao Zedong's wife because she had closed the ballet school that my mother had helped co-found, and was sent to be re-educated. And this is why I was actually born on a Chinese re-education farm during the Cultural Revolution. So Alex, I do understand some of the downsides of what happens in improperly organized or governed states. But I was able to move here in 1980 when my uncle, my actually granduncle, helped to sponsor me.
Yeah, when we talk on this pod a lot about the fact that the U.S.-China AI race is driving a lot of what's going on. This is a lot of important policy happening, and it's in the same way that the U.S.-Soviet moon race drove the Apollo program. We keep on falling back to the reason for racing in the U.S. on the AI model development is to make sure that we get to ASI before anybody else. And that's been coloring everything. So I want to get into that on this program. It's important for everyone listening to understand the backdrop of this. So let's kick it off. We've talked a lot about open weight models over the last few weeks on this pod. And Alvin, in your essay, Misdiagnosing the U.S.-China AI Race, you lay out a staggering shift, right? Chinese open weight models climbed from 2% to 61% of open router traffic in the last 2 years. Alibaba's Qwen model alone has over 700 million downloads. I'm sure the numbers surpassed since I looked.
It's up to 1 billion now, so.
Yeah, there we go. With 180,000 derivative models. And one of the things, again, we talk about is, when you have an open weight model, it's very easy to fork it and develop it and retrain it yourself. You say that the U.S. export controls on Anthropic's Fable 5 backfired spectacularly, specifically that within 24 hours, China's Z.AI released GLM 5.2 under MIT license. In fact, that was the model used to deal with the Hugging Face debacle. Brazil's Rio built on Qwen, Japanese Sakana released Fugu Ultra. You say that the U.S. denial strategy didn't slow China at all. It accelerated the innovation and alternative ecosystems. And you call this sort of a denial keeps us ahead fallacy, right? So let me throw out the first question. Why do you believe getting clarity and some resolution on the U.S.-China AI race is so important right now?
Yeah, so in fact, this is probably one of the most critical questions that we need to get resolved, because it's having a race condition forces people to make irrational decisions. And right now, there is a perceived race condition. And it's based on some assumptions that I think are actually misguided or maybe misunderstood. Is that there is a perception that there is a finish line. There's a perception that the world is zero sum. There is a perception that whoever gets to AI first or AGI first can somehow rule the world forever, right? And this is a certain segment of the policymaking circles have this belief, and a certain portion of Silicon Valley elites have this type of belief, right? So I think that narrative, forces the whole discussion into a national security issue, when the reality is right now, none of those assumptions are really based on real data today, right? We don't know. Well, first of all, we do know that the world is not zero sum. I mean, as you guys talk about every day, right? Every episode, the world's getting better. We're getting more resources. We're getting more abundant. So it is not a zero sum game. And there is no clear finish line, right? In the sense of, as these technologies get better, they're progressing. And as you as you mentioned with all of these open source models, when the difference gap is moving from a year and a half to now probably 2 or 3 months gap between the open source and the closed source models, there is no finish line where you say, okay, we've won. Right? It's not like the space race, right? The space race, you say, hey, we've landed on the moon, we've won, there is an end. Whereas a arms race type model that we are in today, it's a constant spend and a constant pursuit, without clear value being returned. So, but I don't want to, kind of take too much of this, but I think, this will help set up the conversation that we're having.
Yeah, maybe just to pull on the thesis, Alvin, I think that's latent that there isn't an end game. I'd love to understand how you think about this. From my perspective, there's an obvious end game. There's space, there's development of the solar system, there's interstellar exploration, all of which I expect to be fulsomely and holistically supported by superintelligence. Surely somewhere among the various scenarios that I assume you're analyzing, there are scientific and engineering endgames, quote unquote, that are intrinsically valuable to pursue. Is it your thinking that science and engineering and solving everything, as it were, is not the end game? Is there some other non-end game that you have in mind? Do you think that this is sort of a Red Queen type scenario where intelligence is just sort of endlessly racing as an end to itself, or is there an honest to goodness afterwards, after the singularity, in your mind as it pertains to U.S. v. China?
Yeah, so I think what you're describing in terms of at some point we will get to.
这期节目真正值得我们带走的，并不是某一个模型的排名，也不是中美哪一方能够提前几个月实现 RG， 而是一个更根本的问题。当人工智能被包装成一场必须分出胜负的国家竞赛时，我们是否正在用错误的方式面对一项可能改变整个人类文明的技术？从节目中的讨论可以看到，所谓中美 AI 竞赛至少包含了3层不同的较量。第一层是芯片、算力数据中心和能源基础设施的竞争，第二层是模型、开源生态以及产业应用的竞争，第三层也是最容易被忽略的一层，是治理能力、社会适应能力，以及一个国家能否让普通人真正分享到技术红利的竞争。问题在于，当前很多政策和资本都把注意力集中在最前沿、最大规模的模型上，仿佛只要谁先造出 A 谁就能永久占据世界的制高点。但节目嘉宾反复提醒我们， AI 并没有一条清晰的终点线，技术会持续演进，模型会不断迭代，所谓赢下比赛的那一天可能根本不会到来。真正决定国家长期实力的，也许不是某一家公司拥有多大的模型，而是谁拥有更完整、更开放、更有韧性的生态系统。这也是为什么开源模型会带来如此大的冲击。中国企业在芯片受限、算力不足的情况下，选择通过开放权重、全球协作和低成本创新，调动世界各地开发者的力量。出口管制确实造成了短期限制，却也在客观上推动了国产芯片替代供应链和新的创新路径。一个重要启示是，封锁未必能够永久阻止技术扩散，反而可能促使对手更快建立独立体系。面对竞争，真正有效的策略不能只是不断加码限制，而要看清产业规律，判断哪些限制能够带来安全，哪些限制只是在制造新的对立。节目中关于猎鹿博弈的比喻也点出了中美关系最关键的困境。双方都知道，人工智能可能带来巨大的经济增长，也可能被恶意行为者用于网络攻击、生物化学风险和社会破坏。但在彼此不信任的情况下，双方都担心对方先背叛，于是只能抢先投入、抢先封属。结果就是大家都把资源投入到一场没有终点的军备竞赛里，却没有真正解决安全问题。如果人工智能真的可能影响全人类，那么安全就不应该被理解成某一个国家的独占优势，而应该成为各国共同承担的责任。 尤其值得警惕的是，危险未必来自最大的模型，小型模型一旦获得工具、网络权限和自动化执行能力，同样可能造成严重后果。攻击者只需要找到一个漏洞，而防守者却必须检查整个系统。由此可见 ，AI 安全不是简单的比较参数规模，而是要建立跨国测试、风险通报、应急热线和明确的红线机制。另一个重要判断是 AI 的价值最终必须落到现实世界。中国推动人工智能加秦，强调让技术进入制造、医疗、教育和服务行业；美国则更侧重模型、芯片和算力的领先。两种路径各有优势，但如果技术不能提升生产率、改善生活，也不能帮助劳动者完成转型，那么再强大的模型都可能只是资本市场上的幻象。节目还谈到了数据中心过度建设、私人信贷扩张和 AI 估值过高的问题。无论这些风险最终会不会演变成危机，都提醒我们，技术革命不能脱离经济规律。真正能够长期生存的公司，未必是今天投入最多、估值最高的公司，而可能是那些拥有稳定客户、真实收入、低成本算力和持续应用能力的企业。 AI 带来的财富不会自动平均分配，社会必须提前思考失业、教育、医疗、养老以及劳动者再培训，否则技术进步越快，社会撕裂也可能越深。机器人产业同样如此，中国拥有完整制造体系、庞大市场和严峻的人口结构压力，因此正在加快自动化和机器人应用。但人形机器人并不等于机器人产业的终点，真正有价值的产品往往是最适合具体场景、成本最低、维护最容易的产品。技术发展的方向不能只看外形是否震撼，更要看它能否真正解决问题。至于台湾和 TSMC， 节目给出的提醒也非常重要，不要把复杂的历史、政治和安全问题简单归结为芯片争夺。先进制程依赖全球供应链、工程师、材料、设备和长期维护，任何一方都很难通过占领某个地点就获得完整的产业能力。越是在这种高度敏感的议题上，越需要理解对方的历史记忆与安全焦虑，越不能让误判和情绪替代理性沟通。归根结底，这期节目的核心其实是 AI 竞赛真正比拼的不是谁喊得更快，也不是谁砸下更多资本，而是谁能在创新与安全之间找到平衡，在开放与自主之间建立连接，在技术进步与社会公平之间形成新的契约。未来可能属于最强的模型，但更可能属于最会应用模型、最能组织社会、最愿意与世界合作的生态系统。对于普通人来说，我们不必等待 A 机到来的那一天才开始思考变化。今天的 AI 已经足以改变工作方式、学习方式和企业组织方式。我们需要做的是保持判断力，学习使用工具，关注自身所在行业的变化，也要警惕那些把技术神话化、把国家对立绝对化的叙事。你认为中美 AI 竞争最应该优先解决的是算力和芯片问题，还是安全、就业与国际合作问题？你更看好前沿模型的路线，还是人工智能加这种深入实体产业的路线？欢迎在评论区留下你的看法，也欢迎把这期节目分享给更多关心科技与世界未来的朋友。感谢收看本期内容，欢迎点赞订阅，获取更多精彩视频。